Hi, I'm Jackie Dallas and I'm an actress. I wanted to make a video tutorial on self-taping for actors because I've been self-taping for years and I love it. I've been booked directly from tape for shows such as Stranger Things, 13 Reasons Why, NCIS New Orleans, The Young and the Restless, and so many more projects. So, let's dive in. First off, what is a self-tape? A self-tape is an audition request that you get from a casting director where you have to perform and record it yourself. So the challenge here is, how can you create an audition tape that looks professional and on par with what would normally be recorded at the casting office, which would then be forwarded to the directors and the producers who have the final say in who gets the role? So let's talk about what makes a good self-tape. There are 3 things that I want to focus on. 1, technical aspects, 2, proper method, and 3, performance. When you go to a live in-person audition, you don't ever have to worry about the technical aspects because they've already got their lights and their cameras set up for you. So this information will all be new territory if you've never self-taped before. The second part, proper method, is some stuff that you might already know because it's similar to an in-person audition, and some stuff you might not know because now you have to set everything up yourself. I'll be sure to cover a bunch of different topics and give you a bunch of tips on how to make your tape not only professional, but stand out. And the last part is performance. This is the most important part of any audition, but it's also pretty much the same as if you were auditioning in person. So we'll leave that for the end. Part 1. Technical aspects. Let's talk about the absolute basic equipment that you need to make a good self-tape. First off, camera. A recent model smartphone works perfectly fine. Most cameras nowadays have enough pixels and excellent video capabilities, so what you have in your hand is perfectly acceptable to use. The back camera is always going to be a better quality than the front-facing camera, so be sure to use the back one, not in selfie mode. If you want to upgrade to an HD or DSLR camera, by all means. Depending on the quality of the camera, it can only make your auditions cleaner and crisper in quality. But keep in mind, when you upload your tapes to EcoCast or whatever platform is requested for the submission, there may be size limitations to the file, which would make a higher quality camera unnecessary. Regarding iPads and laptop cameras, my personal experience with these is that they're not quite as crisp in quality as a recent model smartphone, but play around with the different devices that you have and shoot with whatever looks best. I've heard questions about using a GoPro. I would shy away from this camera because it shoots with a bit of a fisheye effect on the edges of the screen and it doesn't look quite natural for an audition. If that's all you have, it'll work for now, but aim to use either a smartphone or a high-def camera moving forward. The next important piece of equipment, the tripod. And if you don't have a tripod yet, something to make your camera stable while you shoot. This can be a cleverly propped up phone on a bookshelf or a table. What you don't want is a shaky handheld camera. Even the steadiest person will have some movement if holding it manually, especially if that same person is your reader. Be sure to get a tripod that is tall enough to reach your eye level. And don't forget the cell phone holding adapter if you plan on shooting with your phone. Lights. Good lighting is crucial to a good self-tape, especially if you're shooting on a device other than a DSLR camera, because while most phones shoot excellent quality videos in good lighting, it can get dark and grainy real fast in poor lighting, making for a poor quality self-tape. Natural lighting is always going to be the most flattering, but that might not always be reliable or practical given what your daily schedule may be. It's always good to have a backup light source in case you need to film in the evening hours. My personal favorite are box lights, which are the lights that come in square boxes with a diffuser because it lights you up with a soft light that doesn't create harsh shadows. You can get these on Amazon for $20 to $60 for 1 or 2, including the diffuser sheets and stand. If you can afford 2, that's ideal. Otherwise, 1 to start is totally fine. Ring lights are another very popular option because they are small, quick to set up, and cheap. One thing to note about ring lights, the larger the diameter, the more natural and evenly lit the lighting will be. And that's what you're going for. And if you don't have any of these options available to you yet, see if you have a table lamp or a movable light source. Position it in front of you so that it'll light your face from the front and not some shadowy angle from the side. Ceiling lights are a last resort because while they can light the room, it might not be bright enough to light you well. Depending on where they are placed, they can also create harsh shadows on your face. You want to try and get as even and front-facing light as possible. Backdrop. The point of having a backdrop is so that the viewer doesn't get distracted by anything that's going on in the background. A blank white wall is perfectly fine to use. Just make sure that you take off any art or paintings so that it's just a plain blank white wall. If you want a slightly more professional look, you can paint the wall a different color or invest in a backdrop. And this could be as simple as getting a king-sized flat sheet and just tacking it up on the walls. A window curtain that has been stretched flat, or a proper muslin backdrop with a stand. Start with what you have and upgrade as you need to. A common question that is asked is what color backdrop to get. A personal and professional favorite is blue, mostly because it's the most flattering color on all skin tones, and most casting offices will usually film against a blue wall, so it makes your tape look that much more professional, just as it would in a standard in-person audition. A neutral gray is also a good choice. Some performers use a green screen, and that's okay too. Personally, I think that green has the potential to make your skin tone look a little funky, but if that's all you have, that's totally fine. Audio. Video is great and all, but if we can't hear what you're saying, the tape is useless. Most smartphones and other devices capture audio well enough as long as you're within a reasonable distance from the camera. Be sure to film in as quiet of an environment as possible. This means no crying children, barking dogs, loud fans, thumping laundry machines, beeping smoke detector. You get the point. If you're filming and a police siren goes by, stop the tape, wait for it to pass, and then do another take. If you want to upgrade for a better sound, there's a variety of mics, including wired and wireless clip-on lavaliers, or lavs for short, and boom mics. Some of them plug directly into your phone or device, which makes it an easy upgrade. But keep in mind, others will record on a separate audio track that you'll need to edit together with the video in the final take. And the final technical aspect, editing software. Because all of your tapes will require a very basic level of editing before submitting. You don't want to do anything fancy, but you will want to clip the beginning and the end of the tapes to get rid of the start and stop finger pointing, as well as crop as necessary for proper framing. And if asked for multiple takes on a single file, you'll need to splice them all together. Most computers come with free software that either comes preloaded or downloadable from the App Store. Apple products have iMovie, and PCs have Windows Movie Maker. Those are both easy and intuitive to use, and there's countless YouTube video tutorials that you can watch and learn how to use the programs. Other popular programs that are free to use include QuickTime and Filmora. If you're a gifted film editor and have Adobe Premiere or some other fancy editing program, that's cool. You'll probably already know how to do these basic things and more. Just restrain yourself from over-editing because your audition tape should look as clean and natural as possible. Part 2, proper method. Okay, cool. So you got all your equipment to self-tape with, but now what? How do you put it all together and actually tape something? Framing. First rule of framing is always, always, always shoot horizontally, not vertically. We watch on screens that are wider than they are tall, so you should film that way also. Second rule of framing is to always read the casting notes or directions. If they tell you how they want it framed, do as they say. A waist-up shot is a fairly wide shot, and this is how it's usually framed, bottom being around the belly button. A close-up tight shot is usually just the head and neck, cropped somewhere around the collarbone. The standard medium close-up is going to be chest high. This is the ideal framing unless otherwise directed. The top of the frame in all of these is going to be right at the hairline. You don't want to cut off your forehead, but you don't want to have a lot of empty head space either. Try and be as centered as you can and be mindful of any movement so that you always stay in frame. Moving side to side can be done as necessary, as is exiting or entering or pivoting in frame, such as you're talking or approaching different characters in the scene. You really do want to try and stay away from moving forward and moving backwards in your scene though, because that'll really affect your framing. Eyeline. You always want to cheat your eyeline towards camera, and if your camera is 12 o'clock, you really want to stay between 10 and 2 o'clock. If you're only talking to one other character, it might help to have your reader stand just offside to the camera so that you can maintain eyeline. If you have 2 or more characters in the screen, alternate between the 2 sides. This can get tricky and counterintuitive in certain scenes, such as car scenes where you're driving and talking to a passenger. One trick for this specific situation would be to establish your windshield or road at 10 o'clock and your passenger at 2 o'clock. The main point is you want to cheat your face forward to avoid any profile shots. You also want to avoid looking directly into the camera unless you're auditioning for a commercial, industrial, a hosting job, or if you're auditioning for a role like a reporter where they would be addressing the camera straight on. Another important element is the height of your eyeline. Try and keep your eyeline as eye level as you can. Even if you're supposed to be looking up or looking down, remember, we can't assess your acting if we can't see your face and your eyes. So cheat your eyeline so that it's not so dramatic, so that we're not looking up your nose or at the top of your head. Another element that you want to keep eye level is your camera height. You don't want to position too low looking up at you or too high looking down at you. Once again, this is where a tripod comes in handy. But if you're propping your phone up against something, just make sure you stack it on some books or put a chair on a table so that you can get it at the proper eye level. Lighting tips. The best kind of light should be diffused. Same reason that photographers like to shoot mostly on slightly overcast conditions. Direct light not only creates shadows, but harsh ones. Softbox lights come with a diffuser to give a soft, even lighting. Ring lights can also have diffuser covers. In a pinch, you could also drape a thin white cloth, some tissue paper, wax paper, or a white plastic bag over the light. But you want to be very, very careful about what type of bulbs it uses and if they get hot. If they do, don't do that. If you have just one light, the best position is to place it in front of you at eye level. This ensures a bright, even light, and you'll get those beautiful catch lights in your eyes that give you an extra spark of emotion. If you have 2 lights, I prefer to space those out at 10 and 2, giving you even lighting for all camera-facing angles. You don't want to be lit from below or from above because it would cast shadows on your face, just like you don't want to be lit from the side. And you definitely don't want to have your light source behind you because then you'd only be seen as a giant shadow. Wardrobe. There are no hard and fast rules about wardrobe, but do try and dress the part. That doesn't mean get into full costume, but wear something appropriate for the scene. Like if you're auditioning for the role of a business person or a lawyer, wear professional attire rather than a tank top. Some general notes about wardrobe to keep in mind. Stay away from certain colors unless it's specific for the character. Colors like red and green tend to read inaccurately and make your skin tone look a little funky on camera. Similarly, white and black can affect the white balance of a camera and look either blown out or indistinguishable. Also, be mindful of wardrobe choices that may blend into the background and make you not stand out. If the role calls for it, wear it, like a white lab coat for a doctor, or all black for a funeral scene. But otherwise, if you can avoid it, try and do so. Another general rule is to stay away from tight patterns or stripes. It can cause a movement artifact on camera called moire, which is hard to explain but incredibly distracting when you see it. And a final note, particularly for the ladies, be aware of the depth of your neckline and your shirt straps. If you're filming in a close-up or even medium close-up and you have a plunging neckline and long hair, it might read as topless. Props. Props are generally not used in auditions, mostly because they're distracting. The only prop that's really universally accepted is a cell phone, but there's really no reason why you can't mime this either. Don't drink out of cups, don't carry stuff, and for the sake of casting, don't use a weapon, toy or otherwise. Movement. Movement in auditions can be tricky. There's two types of movement. Small movements, like what are you doing with your hands, and big movements, like fight scenes. Something as simple as entering the scene to start requires you to be aware of your framing, when to start speaking, and so many other factors. So if you're going to add movement to your scene, make sure it fits and is necessary. Get rid of any unnecessary movements and actions that are not explicitly written in the script or do anything to enhance the scene. One common example of a small movement is a dinner scene. Don't feel the need to be constantly miming drinking, cutting up food on your plate, or forking it into your mouth or chewing. You can start the scene with a small nonverbal action or a button that implies that you're at dinner and establishes the setting, like taking a sip and then putting it down. I also want to say that if you don't have any small actions written into the script, you still want to bring in some natural movements so that you're not so still that you come off as stiff or so fidgety that you look uncomfortable. Every movement on camera is magnified, so make sure that every action and every movement is a deliberate choice. Something as simple as brushing your hair from your face or shifting your weight to the other foot should be done with intention. Some big movements, like running or fighting scenes, you want to minimize them to make them manageable too. Consider running into frame and then stopping to deliver your lines as if you're catching your breath, or throwing a punch to start and then delivering your lines as you stand in defensive stance. Read the sides carefully to tease out what actions are necessary for the scene in the audition and what actions are just meant to look cool in the full finished production. Sitting versus standing. No preference. Do whatever's appropriate for the scene. If it's a car scene, sit. If it's a scene with a lot of movement or action, then stand. Just always be aware of your frame. Some people prefer to sit for all their auditions. It helps them stay grounded and more still, especially if you're a fidgeter or someone who likes to shift their weight a lot. Remember that depending on the chair you use, if you use a standard chest-up frame, you shouldn't be able to tell that you were sitting or standing anyways. Audio. We discussed a lot of audio things earlier, but the main takeaway is to make sure that you're filming in a quiet environment and your dialogue is heard clearly and audibly. Even if that means raising the volume during editing, you want to make sure that casting can hear you without having to turn their volume button all the way up. One note specific to audio, make sure your reader is not louder than you. Oftentimes, your reader is going to be helping you operate the camera and act as your eyeline, so usually they stand right next to the camera. This proximity will make their voice naturally pick up louder than yours, so if it's possible, have them stand back from the camera a few feet so that they're still at an appropriate eyeline, but equidistant from the camera as you, so that their voice does not boom over yours. You can also coach them to speak their lines softer to make your lines further stand out. And speaking of a reader, do you need one? Short answer, yes. While you can get away without having a reader, like pre-recording the other person's lines or
using a voice changer,
nothing is going to be a good substitute for a real live reader. With a reader, you don't have to worry about timing and you have someone who can adapt to your delivery and tone as well as your pacing. You'll have a real eyeline with a real person, and that by itself will draw out a more authentic performance because emoting with a real human is so much easier than acting to a wall. Additionally, you'll have the opportunity to react and respond non-verbally to their lines, and that is just as important and compelling as your dialogue when it comes to casting. An acceptable substitution for a live reader is a virtual reader. They can still give you the benefit of adopting their tone and pacing to your read, and depending on the placement of your device in video chat mode, possibly an Eyeline as well. Finding a reader can be challenging, and while there's definitely an advantage to having another actor as a reader, anyone can do it. It doesn't matter what age or gender or accent. Nowadays, there's great apps and video capabilities so you can call in your friends remotely to help you, or even hire a fellow actor who you've yet to meet on sites like We Audition. Bottom line, there is no excuse now to not complete an audition because you can't find a reader, or submit a tape with quiet blank segments where the other character's lines should be. Don't do that. Slates. Slates are something that's really overthought. It's a simple declaration of your name and whatever other bits of information that casting wants to know from you. Most commonly, it's going to be your height, your representation, your location, and they may ask a random question. It just depends on the job. You can do it in character if you want, or you can do it as your natural personality. It's casting's way of identifying your tape, what your normal voice and accent sound like, and to get a better sense of you as a person. Just remember that it's still part of the audition process, so treat it professionally. Framing for the slate is usually a tight or medium close-up. They may ask for profiles, which is just turning in either direction so that they can see the sides of your face, and if they don't ask you for profiles, don't do it. They may ask for a full body shot, and then it's totally acceptable to cut to a clip where you flip the camera vertically so you can get your entire body in frame. If you do this, be sure to crop as close to the top of your head and the bottoms of your feet as you can to maximize your presence on the screen. Once again, they may ask you for profiles, or they might ask you to do your full slate in the full body, or even hold up a sign that has all your information written on it. They may ask for a single shot of your full body at once, or they may ask for a pan up and down. The point is, read and follow the directions, and if no directions are given, just name, role, and height in the close-up slate is usually sufficient. When submitting auditions through EcoCast, slates are usually uploaded as its own separate file. If you are uploading all takes and slates in a single file, it's most commonly placed at the end of the tape, at the end after all of your takes. Submitting. Follow directions, down to how they want each file sized, labeled, and organized. Like I said, most EcoCast auditions will want each take and the slate as separately labeled files. Some casting directors have a direct upload and prefer all in one file. Usually there's a cap of around 500 megabytes, so you want to keep that in mind when you're exporting from your editing software. Unless specifically noted for smaller auditions, such as co-stars or sides that are less than 1 to 2 pages, I personally think it's advantageous to submit 2 takes. The key being different takes, while still fitting the character breakdown. Play around with your different intonations, intentions, emotions, or even the groundedness of the character. The reason for this is that with a self-tape, unfortunately, we lose the ability to redirect. In the room, you may go,
"How could you do this to me?"
And then the casting director may say,
"Hey, that was great. Let's do it again, but this time be more hurt than angry."
"How could you do this to me?"
But with a tape, you have to follow your gut and perform it in the way that you think it's meant to be. By doing 2 takes, you can get 2 chances to deliver the performance that they're looking for. And at the very least, you show range and directability. Okay, last part. Labeling your tapes. If they don't specifically tell you how to label your tapes, the standard way is to at least put your name and the role in the file name. If they're asking for separate files, you can add Scene 1, Scene 2, or Take 1, Take 2, or Slate. And as far as deadlines go, don't miss them. They're there for a reason. Most sites will actually automatically stop the ability to upload files past the deadline. Most casting directors actually start screening tapes as they come in, so if you're waiting until the last minute, they may have already found the person that they want to cast. And try not to ask for extensions because you'll just end up looking unprepared and unprofessional. Part 3, Performance. The third and final aspect of what makes a good audition tape is your performance. And keep in mind, this is what ultimately decides whether you get the role or not. It doesn't matter how beautifully lit your audition is. If your performance is not believable, you've got other things to work on in order to get cast. That's not to say the other two elements are not important, because if your tape is not professional looking or sounding, there's a chance that it won't even be watched. And casting certainly won't forward that tape to producers because it'll be a poor reflection on them. I'm not going to talk about what's the best training or method because all actors are different and the best one is what works best for you. However, don't neglect breaking down the script, just as you would for an in-person audition. Maybe even more so, because you're going to lose the opportunity to ask a question at the audition to clarify things. Read every word on the pages given to you, including the bits that are crossed out and the partial scenes that are printed immediately before and after your lines. There's a chance that there may be hints about the show, arc, and characters in those lines. If it's a series that's already airing, watch an episode or two to get a feel for the tone of the show. Read up on the character arcs so far, and if it's a new series or film, research what the writers, directors, producers, and studio has made before. Most of them work on similar genre shows. Is it a co-star role where you just deliver your lines as naturally and casually as you can? Or is it a major role where you should make bold choices and bring an element of yourself to the character? Breaking down sides or a script is homework for every audition, and self-tapes are no exception. I'm also a coach and consultant. Well, that's it. I hope this video has been helpful, and I just wanted to give a quick plug for my consulting services for actors, where we talk about the business of acting and we go over your materials, set actionable goals to get your career moving to the next level. More information is at my Facebook page, facebook.com/Jackie Dallas Consultant. Break a leg, y'all. See you on set.